My name is Johannes Robbrecht. I'm actually not the Robbrecht of Robbrecht and Dahlen. The Robbrecht of Robbrecht and Dahlen is my father, Paul Robbrecht, and Dahlen is my mother, Hilde Dahlen. I started in the office beginning of 2002, and now I'm leading together with my parents Robbrecht and Dahlen architecture. We're based in Ghent, Belgium. We have our office there. Ghent was in the 19th century city where textile industry was at a high rise. And our office is close to this park, which used to be a very long textile factory in the 19th century. This is our office, where the hand is. And this area was an area where the people lived who were working in this 300-meter long building. This area is marked and identified by small houses. It's a kind of a social neighborhood with all different backgrounds, poverty and some problems. But it's kind of developing into a new area. The city is expanding, and so we found our office there, which was a former wood storage space for a kind of do-it-yourself store. It was empty, and we decided to leave the main hall empty as a kind of space that only wanted to be the space where sometimes activities could happen and most of the time nothing. On the right side, we organized in this bay, we organized our offices on 2 levels. On ground level, meeting rooms, kitchen, kind of the social floor where other people could meet. And on the first floor, the top floor, the different workstations. This would allow the people working in our office to overlook the garden and this central square, a garden that's where we wanted to collect trees, a kind of arboretum of trees that we came to like in our history of the office. The street is here. The street is here. My father is living here, and I'm living on the other side as kind of gatekeepers to the central area of this housing block. Probably a bit intimidating when you come to work. But on the other hand, the office has a swimming pool, and in summer we kind of like to use it. This is a garden of my father overlooking this vast and empty hall where trees are growing under the roof. We changed the roof. The direction of the roof lights is now according to the direction of these wooden beams, which are original. The hall was constructed in the 70s. It was constructed by De Koene. De Koene was a kind of company and already started from the 50s, who was also building one of these amazing pavilions of the Expo 58 in Brussels. But continued till the 70s, so we were kind of happy to have one of these buildings, iconic buildings. We live or work together in this building with another Flemish architect, Marie-José van Hey, who is a kind of steady friend of my parents. In this central square, you can see a kind of relics of a column of a project we did in Krefeld, which I will talk later about, and the stove. We saw an image, a picture of Picasso sitting next to a similar stove. So we kind of like these two vertical elements in this square. The lights, we had to move from our former office. We are here since 2008, and we had to move from our former office due to a demolition next door that almost broke down our office, and so we had to move, and we took the lights and made this kind of new rooster. Inside we used, the steel construction is also original because of these heavy wooden trees lying there. But we made divisions in plywood, a kind of very poor material. Actually, it was the cheapest we could do. If we would have done more cheaper, then these kind of nuts would have fallen out. So it's, as architects, the kind of minimum we wanted to do. And on top, on the top floor, we also changed these lights in this kind of shaded roof to gain northern light, and are overlooking this garden and this hall. People are organized, or about 45 people are organized around these small cabinets, a small group of people working together on different projects. A few years ago, the office started in mid-70s, we wanted to make a book trying to tell the story of the office. We had done a wide variation of projects, and we wanted to try to bring this together in a book where we first decided on the size and then started to fill in. And what we also use in the office to decide on size and to decide on proportion is a kind of number system, which we call the Lue. Number system using the numbers 3, 5, and 7, multiplying them, and the products of each of these multiplying again. So we come to this row of numbers where we have a kind of central number, which is the number 105, kind of opposition to the meter. So we kind of use more our row of numbers. So we decided on this book to have to use these numbers and to define the size of the book. So it's about 63 millimeters long, 7 by 9, and so on. The book had to have a certain symphonic character. We wanted to have themes. We wanted to identify themes in our work. We wanted to use certain variations, and it had to have a kind of repetition. So things and projects and aspects of our work come back in different projects, are combined and kind of tell a non-chronological approach to our work. Each of these fragments relates also to this number system. You see that there will be 5 themes, there are 9 key projects, there are 63 projects, and so on. So these are the 5 themes. We wanted to talk about art. Our office has worked a lot with artists. We have a lot of collaborations with artists. Since recent years, we also worked on projects by masters in architecture, Henri van der Velde, Mies van der Rohe, Horta, and so on. The central focus of our work is to deal with people, to make projects that are create some sort of comfort for people. As architects, we also design objects, and as architects, we have this kind of encounters through our history with other aspects. One of the first projects we did is actually a very small project in '86, an exhibition or a moment in Ghent, when Ghent was a kind of epicenter of art, of the art world in Europe, where about 100 houses were selected, and artists came there to make a sculpture or to do an intervention in these houses. And alongside this exhibition, which brought hundreds of thousands of people to Ghent, alongside this exhibition was another exhibition called Initiative 86, where different curators are asked to work with Flemish artists and combine them with an architect. So here we did a kind of scenography for the work of René Heijvaart, very fragile work, very, in a way, recognizable materials and a kind of materiality. And we wanted to create a certain domestic character to show these objects. The house is a later project. In Antwerp we have the Middelheim Museum, which is a large open-air museum for sculptures. It's about this area. It's one of the largest sculpture parks in Europe, and in Holland or in the Netherlands you have one too. And it had the opportunity of an extension of a flower garden here. And because of that, the museum asked us to design a pavilion where fragile work could be shown, work that was capable to deal with the elements, with rain and heat, but was fragile and needed some kind of protection at night and so on. So we designed this small pavilion that also wanted to tie the new flower garden to the existing park, a kind of pavilion where the paths were kind of knotted together. And therefore we use also this number system. So the system kind of uses 3 and 7 and 5 and in different ways to build up this plan of the pavilion. It's used also, it was kind of possible to migrate through the plan. And we use steel as a kind of construction material, single blade steel, where these small dots are perforations of the small columns on the inside. So on the inside you have these small columns perforating the steel blades, going up to the roof, and where these different structures come together, as you would have in certain Gothic churches, where these lines of structure are kind of come together. The gates, which are able to open and close, have this kind of mesh, this kind of weaving idea. We believe that weaving is a kind of essential part of making architecture. Think of certain primitive buildings, which use weaving as a part of their construction. The inauguration exhibition was Thomas Schutte, the German artist Thomas Schutte, who created and was perfect choice to show his ceramics, his fragile work of ceramic objects in this space. This history of art and working for art goes also back to the Documenta in Kassel in '92, where we designed a series of, actually one pavilion, but a series of spaces, kind of, we call it wagons of a train, looking to the east of Germany in this Auerpark, and where kind of flow of people would go from one to the other pavilion. On the one side, was closed on this side. On the other side, there was a kind of glass facade overlooking the landscape. So it was a kind of intention to combine also paintings to the landscape. It was kind of the idea that we as architects relate more to painting, to the landscape, and not to sculptures. These Auer pavilions, we collaborated with many of these artists, but also I'm kind of quite intense with Gerhard Richter to show these abstracts, and also with, at that time his wife, but not anymore, Isa Gensen. In Barcelona, we worked then together with Juan Munoz, for whom we designed a small pavilion, actually also a bit relating to this Auer pavilion, so this kind of same shape of roof, a kind of shelter for his kind of enigmatic sculptures that do or not communicate with each other. Also, this structure is kind of made out of steel, so bronze-like or corroded steel. In Knokke, which is a city in Belgium at the coast, we worked together with Franz West. Franz West is an Austrian artist who died a few years ago. Our coast is characterized by kind of one line. It's only about 60 kilometers long. It's one line, one straight line. At certain moments, there's kind of shift in this line, kind of accident. And on one of these accidents, we created a square that was paid by its underground parking. And these exits were marked then by artist intervention of Franz West. The square also has this kind of dotted pointillistic tiling referring to paintings of Seurat. So our coastline is also marked by this long row of apartment buildings which form a wall, a kind of Atlantic wall towards the sea. At this moment we are working on the University Library in Ghent, which was originally designed by Henri van der Velde already before the war, before in the 30s, but it was only completed after the war. And it was asked to us to do a restoration of the tower, which was in very bad shape, to do some reconstruction of some of the elements that were demolished. And therefore we also we made a new depot of books underground in the courtyard. And so we were able to scratch off 3 centimeters of concrete of this tower. So the complete tower was naked to its steel reinforcement. And then pour again 4 centimeters of concrete to this tower. We added a new entrance in this historic building to a new IT center, which is a kind of canopy, kind of shelter to the entrance of the building. In Krefeld, in 2013, we had a long history, or at least my parents had a long history of visiting Krefeld in the Haus Lange and Haus Esters, where there were many exhibitions in the 80s, also Gerhard Richter and Juan Munoz. And we got to meet some of the people in Krefeld, and we were asked at a certain time to think about reconstruction of the golf clubhouse that Ms. van der Rohe designed for Krefeld but never executed. This was actually kind of the state of drawings that existed. There was only one drawing, this one, where there was a section. We had no facades, we had no idea of materiality. So it was, for us, it was a really inspiring way of, as directors, to look at the score, for us to look at the plan and try to imagine what the intentions of Ms. van der Rohe could be. So we made this kind of pavilion where we focused only on the architectural qualities and the spatial qualities of the project. Those elements that we didn't know, we didn't execute. We didn't do the roofs, we didn't do facades, and we only focused on those things that we knew. We could imagine there were columns, the cross-shaped columns that we know from the Barcelona pavilion. There were some perspectives that show these cross-shaped columns, but spaces that we didn't know became this kind of abstract interplay of walls with the back. But on the other parts of the design were these very enigmatic spaces overlooking the landscape, overlooking probably the golf play, and we used also again plywood to as a kind of model, as a kind of moment in the design where we as architects try to make it a kind of spatial configuration without already have determined everything. We could figure out, or we did one assumption that probably the freestanding walls would have been, or could have been, this precious natural stone that Ms. van der Rohe also used in the Villa Tugendhat or in the Barcelona pavilion. So we varnished them in a kind of high glossy varnish. But in Moscow, there is this one building which is the cinema next to the embankment building, and was designed by Boris Yofan. Boris Yofan was this architect who created this monument for the Soviets, but he also did this kind of more modernistic buildings. It was abandoned and perhaps misused too. There was a competition to create a museum for contemporary Russian art. So the only thing we did was to bring back light in this building. We opened up the roof. We added very carefully some new lights, some new windows, and actually mainly untouched, left the building untouched. In this book, we also wanted to focus on on people. And for this we have a series of films that we have made on 11 or 12 projects by Maarten van den Abelen. Is a filmmaker, Brussels-based filmmaker who has done films for Pina Bausch and Max Stewart. So he's not architecture related, but we asked him to do portraits of our buildings. And for this section of the book, we asked him to only focus on the appearance of people in our project. So it became this kind of movie in the book, this kind of movie of stills in our book. As architects, we design objects, not because we want to design objects, but mainly because the project asks to design objects. So we design benches and stools and tables that appear in different projects. As a kind of counter figure to the Louis, we designed female figure, which also became a bench. And we designed a table for the anniversary of Gerhard Fischer. One of the larger projects we are working on now is our Flemish radio and television company, VRT. It's in Brussels. It's collaboration with many, but especially with Dielman Blanc Architecture and young, actually my age, office in Ghent too. And what was interesting is an image from our hall in our office, is that we rediscovered the pleasure of making models. So we did, and at this time, doubled probably. We made many models to do research on the different aspects, on the different scales of this project, to really investigate what the effect would be. The project is a part of a larger development in Brussels on site of the VRT itself. So the current building is a very long building here, which they will demolish after they have built their new headquarters. And then the further development of this area can happen. The building of the VRT is characterized by two parts: a head, which you want to tie up to the urban fabric around, and a body that is kind of laying in a park and a kind of sequence of park, green, and squares, and kind of leads you from the one side to the other side. In the middle, there's a covered square connecting both sides of the building and also create the possibility of different events. Here you see the ground floor level with this covered area, and on top is the news floor, connecting both the head and the body as a kind of one continuous layer through the building. In this covered square, and we try to think of them in the same way as our office with this unused space. We allow it, and we think it should be okay to have moments when it's unused, but we also like the idea of to imagine that at some point some concert or some radio or television activity could happen there. So it could, at some point it could become some outside studio. Something wrong with the image. On the south facade, so this is his head, cladded, and the body both cladded with bluish ceramics. But on the south facade, there is a system of balconies and winter gardens overlooking this park, gaining sunlight from the south, and creating this in-between space between inside and outside, creating a moment where people could work on a chilly day or and have a kind of informal way of talking to each other. At the moment, and it still would be, there is a cemetery of World War II. As figures on these balconies, there will be an artist integration by Philip van Snick, a kind of lodges of sculptures overlooking the park and the garden, and form kind of composition on the facade. In recent years, and it was something that didn't happen before 2005 more or less, we are doing housing. It's something quite recent in Belgium to do large-scale housing projects. We have a history of separate family houses. Our country has a kind of sprawl of these smaller family houses. So now, try to think a bit more efficient. And what we are actually doing two projects. One of them is built, and another one is still a project which will come soon. The grey ones is a master plan by Secchi Vigiano, Italian architects, and where they want to have kind of relation of the neighborhood, the new neighborhood in Antwerp, to the Scheldt, the river Scheldt in front. So they really want to have this idea of landscape penetrating into the neighborhood, with green areas, open areas. They call them panoramas, and want to create buildings that at every time overlook some sort of vista, some sort of landscape. This one first building we did, a kind of bar of apartments, where the side of the panorama, the landscape, the kind of park, always by regulations that were formulated by the master plan architect, these sites needed to have winter gardens, refectories, overlooking this landscape. But by kind of moving this facade, we had this idea that actually the view was towards the river Scheldt, that's higher up. So we wanted to have an all kind of facade that was wrapped around the full volume. The other building we're doing now is this kind of U-shaped building on the river Scheldt itself, but we used this similar idea to bring some sort of unity in the neighborhood, to reuse ideas of ourselves and to create a kind of repetition and variation on a theme. It will be a red building, red concrete building with steel detailing of frames and winter gardens. On top there is a garden that can be used by the people living in the project. We also wanted to use to have red frames and red detailing. On ground floor it will be, except from the parts on at the street, it will be open, creating a kind of open flow through the building. A recent project we finished is this market hall, also based in Ghent. Ghent its center is characterized and identified by 3 Gothic towers of 3 moments in this Gothic period. And in the 19th, beginning of the 20th century, and in the 60s, it was decided that a housing block in the middle had to be demolished. Also, housing or volumes that were attached to these historic buildings were demolished. It left the city center of Ghent kind of unidentified, became a parking space. And in '96, there was a question to make a competition to make an underground parking in between these towers. The office joined the competition but refused to do the underground parking. We lost the competition. But it raised a very important question. Do we want to have parking space in the center of a historic building ensemble? So this competition didn't came to a conclusion. Actually, we won the competition. The jury said this is the best project, but the city said yes, but there is no parking space. So there was a referendum in the city. People voted against a parking space. And 5 years later, there was a new competition. We joined the competition again, and we handed in the exact same design. This time we won, and it's built. But what it mainly wanted to do is to reconfigure the historic spaces that were there. So by demolishing this housing block in the beginning of the 20th century and parts in the 60s of the former century, the urban fabric was demolished. And the new volume, its main function, of course, except of making activities and events and such, was to re-establish this urban fabric. And to find a way to mimic or to do kind of variation on the existing housing and city hall in this case. There's a small park in front. There's actually kind of slope going from a higher point to a lower point, allowing to make it green and a bar or a restaurant underneath this volume. In the same way as our office and as the VRT project, this empty space is good to be empty, but allows a lot of activities. I think as architects we like to create these spaces of some sort of expectation, something we don't know what could happen, but there could happen things. But it's also okay if they don't. One critic said, relating to this, it's good to have this moment walking in the city that you can kind of migrate through it and then be there. The material is wood. It wants to be kind of lesser important material than these historic buildings that are made out of stone. So in the hierarchy of materials and in the, hopefully not the lifespan, but in this kind of more humble approach of our project to the existing features of wood, perforated with some thousands or more windows. The Chamber Music Hall in the area near Brussels it's the landscape of Breugel, Pajottenland. We were asked to create a chamber music hall for competitors to the Elizabeth competition for piano and violin and singing. It's kind of a ziggurat-like building with a slope on the outside, but also creating the space on the inside. Slope on the outside goes to a roof terrace overlooking this landscape. The concert hall in Bruges, the city of Van Eyck. Competition at the end of the last century and finished project in 2003. Where also, I think at that moment we realized that creating this void was actually one of the main purposes of our profession, to allow this moment of us as the audience or us as the spectator and relating to something that is happening there, a concert or something else. On the left there is the foyer, the lobby. The center is the chamber music hall. In the same way as we added a volume in the center of Ghent, the market hall, that was not asked. We added in this competition a chamber music hall that was not asked. But it, at the end, became one of the strong identities of the building. On the right is the main hall, gaining daylight in this hall, because a concert, in contrast to an opera or theater, allows daylight during its show. That's about it. Thank you.